Welcome to the bi-weekly podcast that explores all that is myth, legend, and folklore in Scotland. Join me, Ryan, in discovering tales from Galloway to Shetland and from the Hebrides, Peterhead. This is Finding Folklore. The folklore of Scotland, like that of many countries, does not stand alone, with many of the tales being told having direct influences from our surrounding countries. We share much with England and Wales, such as tales of giant serpents and other recurring animals in British mythology, such as the white hart and hind that appeared before Thomas the Rhymer in her story When Man Meets Fairy, Thomas the Rhymer and the Elven Queen. We even share much of Arthurian legend, something we will be discussing in great detail in future episodes. We share mythology with our Norse brethren, as explained in the episode, The Selkie Wife of the Shetland Isles. And of course, we share much with our neighbours to the west, Ireland or Éire. Mythologies from all countries have their fair share of tales of heroes and heroism. In that sense, the folklore of Scotland and Ireland is no different. But unlike the tales of Hercules and Achilles from the ancient Greco-Roman myths, the heroes of Scottish myth were not always the ones with the most military prowess or strength in battle, but often those who were quick of thinking and sharp of tongue. One such tale emerged with strong connections to both the Western Highlands and to Ireland. A tale that shows just how far a man will go to protect the life of his sons. This is the tale of Conall Bhuidhe, Conall Yellowclaw. Conall was a good citizen of his homeland, where he stayed with his wife and 4 sons. The land was divided up into 5 kingdoms, each ruled over by a different family, each family coveting the land of the others. Conall's sons one day found themselves in a fight with the sons of the king, eventually resulting in the death of the king's eldest son. The king responded by taking Conall's sons prisoner and summoning Conall to court. The king told Conall that he would receive little joy from killing Conall's sons, but he saw no other option. Blood should be paid with blood. Conall bid the king that if he spared his son and forgave them their crime, they would complete any task that the king required. Well, the king knew of Conall's reputation as an adventurer and a hero, so he gave him the choice. Either Conall's sons could be put to death, or they journeyed to the next kingdom and steal that king's favourite steed. Conall knew that stealing the king's prized possession would result in the death of them all if they were caught, but he also knew that a possible death for them all later was better than a certain death for his sons now, so he agreed. Conall and his sons returned home, where Conall planned their journey and tried to come up with a way to steal the horse from the palace without being caught. Conall had one friend whom he had not seen in years that lived in their neighbouring kingdom, and he owed Conall a great debt, for Conall saved his life when they were but boys. So Conall decided the best course of action was to pay him a visit. They ate, slept, and then the next morning said goodbye to their wife and mother. The journey by horseback was not an overly long one, but soon Conall and his boys found themselves in the next kingdom and at the home of his friend. The friend greeted Conall and his boys, fed them stovies, and offered them a place to sleep for the night. Over some drinks, Conall explained the reason for his visit, and that he had to steal the king's prize horse. "You're in luck," the friend said, "for I happen to harvest the grain for the horses, and tomorrow the king's guards arrive to collect sacks of it. I'm sure if we put our heads together, we could find a way to get you into the palace stables." Conall inquired how many sacks were to be collected. The friend showed Conall a dozen sacks full of grain, each easily the height of a grown man's chest. Conall decided the best plan for him and each of his boys was to get inside a sack and then be covered with the grain. This way the guards would carry them directly into the stables. Conall's friend agreed, and the next morning they carried out their plan. They didn't have to wait in the sacks long before the guards came in and carried them off. The plan went without a hitch. By midday, they were in the stables, and they waited in their sacks until the sun set and things had quietened down. As quietly as they could, they emerged from the sacks and looked about the stables until they found the king's favourite steed. They went to wake it, but one of Conall's boys tripped and fell into the horse, causing it to whinny. The ruckus brought the guards into the stable, and they were caught. They were hauled before the king, who was 20 years Conall's junior. "What do we have here?" the king asked. Conall saw no way out but to tell the truth and hope he could bargain his way for his life and the life of his boys. "I see you were put into a predicament," the king announced. "For that I shall spare your life, and as your accomplice who put you into the sacks owed you a life debt, I shall also spare his life. But I'm afraid the life of your boys is forfeit." "There must be something I can do," Conall asked. The king said, "I've heard of you and your adventures. I have no good storyteller in my kingdom, so if you can tell me a tale of a time more perilous than this one, I shall spare the life of your youngest son." Conall thought for a moment, then began to tell a tale. "When I was a young lad, my father owned much land with many cows. When they were calving, I was sent to collect them. I took another lad with me. We collected one of the cows, and it began to rain. So we took shelter in a bothy and took the cow and the calf with us. We weren't in the bothy for long before 10 large cats entered. Their leader was a fox-coloured cat with one eye. Well, I was none too happy that they were there with us, for I felt they were a bad crowd. The leader looked at me and said, 'Let's play a cronan to Conall Bhuidhe.' I was amazed that they knew my name, and they began to sing. They sang their song, and when they were done, the head looked at me and said, 'Now you must pay the reward.' Well, I had nothing on me, so I said, 'I have no reward, lest you have this calf.' No sooner had I spoke than the cats set upon the calf and tore it apart. The leader then looked at me again and said, 'Let's play a cronan to Conall Bhuidhe.' They played their song, and when they were done, the leader looked at me and said, 'Now you must pay the reward.' Worried, I said, 'I have no reward unless you take this cow.' No sooner had I spoke than the cats set upon the cow and tore it apart. The leader then looked up and said, 'Let's play a cronan to Conall Bhuidhe.' I knew we were in trouble, but there was nothing I could do, and they finished their song and looked at me and said, 'Now you must pay the reward.' Well, I could think of no other option. I said, 'I have no reward, lest you have this boy.' The boy was fast and ran. The cats gave chase, and I ran in the other direction. They caught the lad and devoured him, and then they came back to look for me. I managed to climb up a tree and hid there for a while until one of the cats smelled me and summoned the others. Well, they looked at me from up the tree, and they began to dig around it to try and get me down. From the tree I saw a group of men hunting on horseback, and I shouted for help. The tree collapsed, but just in time the men arrived. I drew my sword and fought with them. Me and the men fought the cats to the death. Eventually, we survived. The cats had died. Conall showed the king a scar that left behind from the battle with the cats, and the king agreed that he had earned the life of his youngest son. If you can tell me another tale, even more perilous than that, then I'll grant you the life of your second to youngest son, the king said. Conall thought for a moment. and started another tale. Many years ago, I was walking along the shore by the rocks when I fell into a hole. Luckily, I was uninjured, because at the bottom of the hole was a large pile of hay and manure. I smelled, but I was safe. After looking around, I could find no way out. Then in came a great giant and 24 goats. With nowhere to hide, the giant caught me. He seized me in his hand and picked me up and slowly began to squeeze. I noticed the giant only had one eye, and so I took my chance and bartered with him. I said, "I will fix your eyesight so that both eyes work as well as each other." The giant thought this over and agreed. He set me on the ground. I gathered heather and manure and set about fixing a patch that I placed on his good eye. I rubbed it in, for I was sure that it would be easier to balance his sight by spoiling the good eye instead of healing the bad one. When the giant noticed he had lost his sight and knew that I would escape in spite of him, he stood in the mouth of the cave. We waited there until morning, when the giant heard the birds. He said, "Let out my goats." Well, slowly I began to let his goats out one by one, while silently I killed the buck. The giant felt each goat as it passed. I donned the skin of the last goat and moved out on all fours. The giant felt the skin on top of me and let me past. I took the skin off and turned. "I am out in spite of you," I told the giant. The giant thought. "Well done, Conall," he said. "I can admit when I've been bested. As a prize for your victory, I grant you this golden ring." The giant removed the golden ring from his hand and threw it towards me. "It won't fit," I said. The giant responded, "The ring is magic. When she put it on, it'll fit." I lifted the ring and put it on, and sure enough, it shrank and began to fit. "Is the ring fitting?" the giant asked. "It is," I responded. The giant smiled and called, "Ring, where are you?" And to my amazement, the ring responded, "I am here." The giant charged towards me. I barely moved out of the way as the giant crashed into the rocks behind me. I tried to pry the ring from my finger, but it only tightened. "Ring, ring, where are you?" the giant asked. "I am here," the ring responded, and the giant charged again. Fearing for my life, I drew my dirk and cut the ring from my finger and tossed it into the loch. "Ring, where are you?" the giant asked. "I am here," the ring responded, and the giant blindly charged into the loch and drowned. When I was sure he was dead, I went into the loch and took all of his gold and silver, which I took from him and took home with me. Conall showed the king his missing ring finger as proof of the story. King nodded. "You have saved the life of your second to youngest son," the king said. "But tell me a tale even more perilous than that, and you shall have the life of your second oldest son." And Conall spoke. "About 20 years ago, I was out on a hunt when I came across a boat filled with gold and silver sitting in the loch. I stepped in to see how I could get it, and as soon as I did, the boat started to move out towards an island I had never laid eyes on before. As soon as I stepped foot off the boat onto the island, the boat returned to where it had came. I climbed a hill to get a better vantage when I saw a young woman at the bottom of a glen. She was crying and held a knife to a baby's throat. "Why do you hold that knife to the throat of that child?" I asked. And the woman explained through tears that a giant wanted to eat the baby and she had to cook for the giant or he would kill and eat her. I went up a set of stairs and found a chamber full of corpses. I cut the meat from one of the corpses and told the woman to cook that instead of the child. "The giant knows how many corpses are here," she said. "He will know it's not the baby is eaten." I thought, then I will take the place of the corpse so he does not know. If he questions the food, you can send him to count the corpses. We put the corpse into the cauldron, but we could not move the lid for it was too heavy. I took the place of the corpse. When the giant came home, the woman fed him the corpse. The giant said the meat felt too rough to be that of a child, but as discussed, the woman sent him to count the corpses. The giant found no body to be missing, but still hungry, picked me up and carried me down to the cauldron. He tossed me in, put on the giant lid, and said to the woman he would have me this after his nap. Surely enough, I was burned by the bottom of the cauldron as I was slowly cooked. As soon as the giant fell asleep, the woman whispered and asked if I yet lived. I said I did, and she bid me to escape. I was able to squeeze through a hole in the lid that was meant for the giant's finger, with only a few scrapes to show for it. I went to kill the giant, but the woman told me that he could only meet his end with his own weapon, so I slowly drew his own spear from him. The spear was too large for me to wield, so I dug it into the ground and rested it on the cauldron. Then I tied the giant's feet together with a rope. I stepped back and screamed to wake him. The giant got to his feet and stumbled when he tried to walk. He landed on his own spear, and it went right through his head. We then managed to get the boat when it came back to the island, and I got the woman and the baby home. With that, the king's mother looked at Conall and said, "Conall, is that you? I was that woman, and the king here was that baby." "Then I am due you my life," the king said. "All of your sons are safe, and I should grant you any favour you require." With that, Conall left the kingdom with his 4 sons, the steed, and as many bags of gold and silver as they could carry. He left the gold and silver at his house, and took the horse to the king as he had promised. They stayed friends for the rest of their days, and his wife and sons threw him a feast for having saved everyone and made them richer than ever before. And that, friends, is our tale of Conall Bhuidhe, or Conall Yellowclaw. So just think next time you're in a tricky situation, can you think your way out of it? How much of it are you aware of? And could you recall the story you've asked? Who knows, maybe learning to tell a story could save you or someone you love. Like, share and subscribe, and let me know if you have ever been in a situation more perilous than this. Until next time, may the devil walk behind you. Bye for now.